What's going on, everybody? Welcome to PFF's live NFL preview show here at the Western and Southern Studios. So glad that you guys are here hanging out with us as we get you ready for Week 7's Sunday slate in the NFL. Trevor Sikkema, Sam Monson, Ian Hartitz, Eric Eager here with you. Fellas, how we feeling? Week 7.
Good. Yeah, let's roll.
I feel like this is weird because usually when there's a lot of buys, you can focus more on games, but the games don't feel there's not as many clear and obvious betting lines this week because there's 3 favorites of over 10 points and there's a lot of kind of the rest of the games kind of being close. It's going to be an interesting week.
I'm very intrigued to hear what you're going to pound the table for betting wise this week, because you've said this. You're like, man, there's so many different factors, there's so many things up in the air. So we're going to get to all of that. Ian, how you doing, my friend?
Great day to be great. Even a bad Sunday of NFL football relatively beats all the other Sundays 8 days a week.
It's still a Sunday of NFL football. We have Kendall Valenzuela here with us. Of course, she's checking out all the YouTube and Twitter comments, making sure that you guys watching are going to be able to get in the show. Kendall, How are you?
Hey guys, nice to see you.
A beautiful Sunday of NFL football. I'm excited. Our Cincinnati Bengals here in Cincinnati got a big game against the Ravens. We're going to get to that. But before we get to that, Cleveland Browns picked up a huge win over the juggernaut Denver Broncos. Okay, maybe they're not the juggernaut Denver Broncos that we thought at the beginning of the season, but Cleveland Browns come away with the win on Thursday Night Football. Figured we just recap that a little bit. Baker Mayfield era over, right? Case Keenum, that's what we're going with now?
I wouldn't go that far, but look, this was like a JV team for the Browns. Everybody was injured. They were down quarterback, they were down 2 running backs, they were down offensive linemen, they're down everything. And
they were up 1 running back. Let's be honest, Sam. Dearness Johnson, AAF superstar. You got to give the guy his due.
Denver still couldn't get it done. If you were a Denver Broncos fan, you're thinking, okay, the first 3 games were a product of 3 bad teams. Then we had a rough run. Now we get a B team for the Browns. Let's get another win under our belt. Nope, dead.
Sam, didn't that game remind you of the whole Case Keenum era in Minnesota? And I mean in a good way. And you had some plays that should have been intercepted that weren't. God shining down on Case Keenum. And then weirdly, Case Keenum made the other quarterback look like complete hell. And just like he did for all 17 games in Minnesota. So it was very much that kind of win. I don't know if that kind of team, when Keenum ran through the NFL in 2017, Aaron Rodgers was hurt, Andrew Luck was hurt, the league scoring environment was down. I don't know if Keenum can actually win in this AFC where there's Herbert, Mahomes, Lamar Jackson, all that. But he can certainly beat a Teddy Bridgewater-led Broncos team. And I think as far as backup quarterbacks go, he's about as good as it gets because you can bring him off the bench and you're still a favorite in a game like that.
It was a nice win for him, but we've known the Browns can run the ball like this against anyone. Now seeing Dearness do it instead of Chubb or Kareem, that was new. But really with this Browns team, we saw this in Week 1 against the Chiefs until they were able to throw the ball at, I think, just a higher general efficiency and be better. They're not going to be able to compete with these big dogs. So it was a good win, but I don't know. If anything, guys, I feel far worse about the Browns' actual contention chances now than I did even a month ago.
Man, it's going back to what you were talking about with the Broncos quarterback, because you said Case Keenum made Teddy Bridgewater look awful. I mean, George Paton better know what he's doing as general manager of the Broncos, because they had the chance to take a Justin Fields, they had the chance to take a Mac Jones, whatever it was, and they didn't. And it seemed like Paton proudly didn't, right? I mean, he was like, of course, no, this is what you do. If they don't get a veteran quarterback yes, go ahead.
Make the move. Come on.
Make the move for what?
Drew Lock, let's go.
Oh, okay. But I mean, Drew Lock was still on the team.
He'll be an entertaining bad, though, not just bad. That's what we got to keep in mind.
Yeah, I think Denver wanted to be good this year. That's the biggest issue. And
that's a difference.
The hard thing is, this isn't the start of a regime. So you talk about Peyton, that it makes sense. When the Niners started with Shanahan and Lynch in 17, they had the 2nd or 3rd pick after the trade, and they went with Solomon Thomas instead of Deshaun Watson, instead of Patrick Mahomes, instead of Trubisky. They did trade the Trubisky pick as well, and it was okay, I guess understand that your team's not very good from a roster standpoint. You also are growing up together, GM and coach. This is a situation where Fangio is on his last leg, right? He's had 2 seasons that were losing seasons for this team, and in some ways it felt like they were trying to Peyton's trying to split the difference between delaying the quarterback decision for when the roster's built up, but the roster's already kind of built up.
Right.
And keep Fangio's job, but it's in the AFC, you can't win with Teddy Bridgewater. You just can't. You have to have good to great quarterback play. And if you don't get that out of the draft, you just try again. Or, you try a high variance guy like Drew Lock, or you trade for a guy like Aaron Rodgers. And I think the Aaron Rodgers trade was maybe what they anticipated being able to do. Sure. And they failed at it.
And that's kind of what I'm saying here is that he just better know what he's doing. Because I joke about this on Twitter, and I'm like, Aaron's going to be in a Broncos uniform next year. If he does, then everything looks like it's according to plan. But if it doesn't, I don't want to say the Broncos roster isn't old, but you're going to start to lose some serious star power over the next couple of years, contract-wise or age-wise.
Rookie deal players who are good on that offense, and they're going to have to pay some of them.
Everything they've been doing makes perfect sense as long as Aaron Rodgers is a prize somewhere down the line, whether it was in the draft this time, whether it was next year, whatever it is. If they end up with Aaron Rodgers, it all makes sense. If the Rodgers thing either was never an option or just doesn't materialize, all of a sudden they're nowhere because the Bridgewater Lock thing was two bad options, neither of which is taking you anywhere. This year's group of quarterbacks, when we say, you should have just drafted Justin Fields, it's not like Justin Fields looks very good at the moment either. Nor, in fact, do any of these rookie quarterbacks. Like, Mac Jones is the best of a bad group, and right now, Mac Jones is just doing a Teddy Bridgewater impersonation. So that wasn't taking them anywhere either. And then next year's group of quarterbacks looks lousy. So all of a sudden, if you're Denver, and you're like, we have this roster we think can contend, but no quarterback to take it anywhere, if it isn't Rodgers, there might not be an option.
Can I ask you a good question, though?
You're saying it's a good question before you ask it. I think we'll be the judge.
Thank you. I'm predicting here. There's not that many games to bet on this week, so I'm going to bet on this question being good. If you're Aaron Rodgers, why the hell would you go to the AFC West? Right?
Maybe he likes the city of Denver.
Maybe he likes the city of Denver. It's a solid city. We'll have to ask Kendall. She was out there. But
what's the better roster to be dropped on?
That's the reason.
The Chargers are going to be better than them.
What, Justin Herbert? They're going to ditch him?
No, he's saying competition-wise.
Okay.
I initially thought that as well.
If you have to face Mahomes twice, especially I think Kansas City after this season where they've shown a lot of warts are going to reload again and actually be do what the Patriots did in 2007 and be like, wow, we were kind of living on the edge here. Let's reload. Mm-hmm. You have Kansas City probably going to be better than they were this year. You have the Vegas Raiders, who are a lot better than people believe, and they're the worst team in that division besides Denver. And then you have the Chargers with Herbert and a great head coach. If I'm Rodgers, I'm looking elsewhere if I want to go play for a team next year.
But that's the reason, right? It's the roster. It's okay, if you're Aaron Rodgers, you're going out of Green Bay, you want to walk into a team that with you has a roster around you that can win.
Yeah.
Denver is one. Who else are we talking about? Washington. The roster around Washington suddenly looks an awful lot worse.
From a pure pass game perspective, the two teams that always stuck out were Broncos with Sutton, Judy, Hamler. Everyone's favorite wide receiver Tim Patrick. The other team, which we did see them elevate a bad quarterback already, the Carolina Panthers, perhaps. So I don't know how easy it is to get out of the Sam Darnold deal, but that could be a spot.
I also think with all the draft capital that they're going to have and all the high draft capital they're going to have, I think an attractive place for Aaron Rodgers is Philadelphia. The coach might be a little bit weird because I don't necessarily know if Rodgers would get along with Sirianni or whatever, but they're in a position where they could trade some first-round picks to Green Bay and still have some left over after the whole thing's done. And Philadelphia has, from the young receiver standpoint, Rager, Smith, Quez Watkins, Dallas Goedert.
They can find a way to get Kumaro.
They can find a way to get Kumaro. Who knows? The city of brotherly love will love him, but yeah. That's one that's, I think, under the radar.
I don't hate Philadelphia, like you said, it's an under the radar one, but that defense is awful. And I feel like it will still take a couple of years for Philly's defense to be at that contention point. And how many years does Aaron Rodgers
The NFC East is basically
easy, you're right.
Is basically Dallas, but Dallas is a hit or miss team, whether they'll be a juggernaut year in and year out. Washington and New York are terrible. So that might be a way to think about it.
No question about it. We're going to get into some top 10 grades that we have here, defense, offense, and overall when it comes to teams. Take a look at where our grades are for each of them. But before we do that, got to talk to you about our friends over at Pristine Auction. This is your go-to place for signed sports memorabilia. It's all auction style. So signed jersey, whatever you were looking for, whatever team, whatever player, you're going to be able to find it. The bidding sometimes starts at $1, which means you can get some serious steals on some great autographed merch. Use the promo code PFF, and if you do, you're going to get $10 off on whatever the first auction is that you win. Not just the first one that you bid on, it's going to be the first one that you win. Do that over at pristineauction.com, your go-to place for signed sports memorabilia. Our top 10 teams, look at the sheet here, for offense. Dallas Cowboys. top of the list here at number 1 overall. They have the top offensive grade as a team for us. Buccaneers number 2, Ravens 3, Rams rounding out the top 4. Sam, let's start with you. Is there a team that really sticks out to you on this list, whether it's for their high grade or you're surprised to see them in here?
Well, first of all, I'm glad that the Cowboys were number 1 in grade as well, because when I wrote the offensive rankings article, I had them number 1 as well. So it's just
feels
nice,
great to
nice to be backed up by the grades of the company that we're representing. That's always nice. The Bengals, though, are the big surprise here for me. Like, last year's Bengals team was a disaster. They had Joe Burrow. We were a little bit excited about what he could do. But he didn't have the receivers to throw to. He didn't have the offensive line protecting him. It was a mess. And all of a sudden, you add Jamar Chase to that, and we have a Joe Burrow looking better than ever because he's maintained the really high grades on everything, short, intermediate. And all of a sudden, he's one of the best deep throwers in the NFL because Jamar Chase is in the lineup. That Cincinnati offense looks really good.
I think for a lot of these offenses, what's ending up happening is the question mark has receded and the strength there has become the main thing, right? So you look at the Cowboys, the question mark was always Mike McCarthy and whether or not he was going to be able to coach good offense and how he had struggled at the end of Green Bay. What you've seen here is more emphasis on Kellen Moore, more emphasis on Dak Prescott, and those are their two. Those are two horses. Similarly, when you look at a team like the Cardinals, the question was always about Cliff Kingsbury and what kind of and what's really happened is this has become Kyler Murray's offense, and Cliff Kingsbury sort of has given up on some of the things that he previously did, which is a lot of quarterback runs, a lot of throws to just DeAndre Hopkins. The offense is more spread out. Murray is taking better care of himself. And then lastly with the Bengals, Zach Taylor versus Joe Burrow, this is Joe Burrow's offense now. And they're really very much running the LSU style of offense he had.
Right.
And he's taking over there. And I think all those developments are good for the teams that I discussed.
What do we think about Zach Ertz and that addition to the Cardinals? It feels like it's just yet another veteran that they're bringing to the table. I got to give him credit. They're going all in, right? I mean, this is a team that's going all in this year with the guys that they're bringing in. Ian, what do you think?
Go back 6 months ago and imagine telling someone that the 2021 Arizona Cardinals are going to be led in large part by James Conner, A.J. Green, and Zach Ertz. This is the air raid offense that everyone got so hyped out about. So, he's fine. We saw his last game with the Eagles. Ertz is still capable of putting up, some level of numbers. But this was never someone that was working as one of the NFL's most efficient tight ends. He put up the big numbers because he was seeing 130 or 150 targets. We can't even get DeAndre Hopkins a high level of targets right now. So Ertz, I think at this point, bigger name than someone that's actually going to be making a huge impact. But whatever, Cardinals undefeated and Kyler Murray's looking like the best quarterback in football more weeks than not. The big thing that stuck out to me though with Kyler real quick, 70% catchable deep ball rate. The Colts are in second at 61%. Kyler, I think he's always thrown a beautiful deep ball, but if you just looked at his passing grades in past years, this was a borderline weakness to his game. Now he's one of the best in the league.
Well, and he's also making those 10 to 19 intermediate throws at such a higher, more efficient rate. And so even though maybe the deep ball stuff might regress at some point, the 10 to 19 stuff is where, the quarterbacks like Mahomes, like Brady, they make their money. And if a quarterback like Murray in year 3 can start to pepper that area of the field, you can win.
Yeah, Ertz has not been brought in to be a superstar tight end. He's been brought in to replace Max Williams, who doesn't have a knee anymore. And Max Williams was a really nice, underrated player, but, a bit part in this offense. The idea is for very little, we can go and get a Zach Ertz, and he can replace that part of the offense, and he should be able to do that.
At least one of the two X's in Max's name.
We got Zach Ertz and A.J. Green being the reason why Rondale Moore can't find more snaps. That's what pisses me off here. We got Andy Isabella on the trade block. What is it about these exciting small receivers, guys?
Is there anybody on this list that where they currently are is not sustainable? Whether it is the Cowboys at the top of the list, anybody in the top 5 or anybody at the bottom of the top 10 that you could see definitely falling out of here? Is there any one team that you think is just really unsustainable where they're at right now?
It's probably Cleveland, right? If Baker comes back and can't play very well, they might not fall in the top 10, but they might be in the bottom part of this top 10.
Sure.
Offensive line injuries have been a thing for them. They've gotten a little bit more healthy. Wide receiver, it looks like Odell's arm is going to fall after every time he gets tackled, and Jarvis is coming back from injury as well. on one end, it could get better for them, but on the other hand, they have a very, they have a tough schedule moving forward. They have not played Pittsburgh's defense yet. They have not played Baltimore's defense yet. The other one, speaking of tough schedules, the Bengals, second easiest schedule to this point, second hardest after this, so they might slide out of there, despite how good Burrow's playing.
Even if you just looked at it in terms of which is the one team in that top 10 that doesn't have a quarterback that you're sure of at this point, it's Baker Mayfield and the Browns, and that's. Even if Baker Mayfield was healthy, they would probably be that one team you would identify as that's a question mark at quarterback. Now it's a guy who is playing through a fully torn labrum in his shoulder, and there's a fracture in there. We have no idea, A, when he's coming back, and B, when he does come back, what level is he going to be playing at with a busted shoulder?
Yeah.
I am waiting to see Aaron Rodgers start to look a little bit more like the guy in 2020 as opposed to the guy in 2019. I mean, hand up, I missed the boat on Rodgers last year in fantasy, but the big reason was because you look at the roster turnover on offense and there wasn't really much difference. It was just like, okay, they drafted Jordan Love in the first round. He'll be pissed off and make more things happen. And it kind of worked out that way, guys. But this year, at least through 6 weeks, dead last in the league in catchable ball rate. Like, I was trying to find this stat of, we use air yards a lot, and those can be tricky because, air yards from Patrick Mahomes not exactly the same as some of these other quarterbacks. But among the top 5 receivers that have had the most just empty air yards, uncatchable passes downfield, we see Robbie Anderson and DJ Moore popping there, and also Devontae Adams and MVS. So I think this Washington game, which we might talk about later, could be the get-right spot that Rodgers needs. Just realize, at least through 6 weeks, hasn't been that world beater that
Washington football team's defense going from a preseason favorite to a slump buster.
You love this.
In 7 weeks.
Let's flip to the other side. Let's flip to the other side of the football. Let's talk about defense. Now looking at our top 10 graded defensive units. Obviously the numbers are a lot lower here. That's just natural. Los Angeles Rams, number 1. No Brandon Staley, no problem, I guess. Buffalo Bills, number 2. Vegas Raiders at 3, Vikings at 4, Browns rounding out the top 5. What do you guys think about this list?
So one of the things here is very clearly, like, for these grades, we have to be clear that these don't include priors, right? That they don't include what we believe to be true preseason, which if you're looking at betting, you're looking at fantasy, those things have to be taken into consideration moving forward. So that's one thing to think about, like when you look and see the Raiders defense there. Like, I don't think anybody is saying the Raiders are the 3rd best defense in the NFL. We're saying that they've played the 3rd best through 7 or 6 weeks.
Right.
And I think that's something to keep in mind. That being said, the Rams are the best defense in the NFL last year. They're grading out as the best defense in the NFL this year. And I think that's pretty sustainable. When you look at the rates at which teams are disguising coverages, you look at the box counts used, you look at all these key performance indicators of playing good, sound scheme, the Rams are still doing under Raheem Morris. And I think that's a very good testament to the coaching staff there.
Do we think this is the year Donald maybe doesn't get the defensive MVP? He's still playing great, 32 pressures and everything. And as we can see, the Rams have been awesome. But if it is an award for the best player in an individual season, the best performance, I do wonder if guys like Myles Garrett, Max Crosby, Trayvon Diggs, if he keeps intercepting a pass every single week, could finally make some noise in this conversation.
Yeah, it's really weird. Like the Cowboys, despite having a guy who's intercepted a pass every week, are not here because it takes a village to play defense. The thing about Crosby, I think Sam's going to say this later in the show, is he's had a very easy slate of right tackles, and that's something that again, our grades, we don't attempt to adjust for opponent until we get into the betting and fantasy space. So that's the thing to think about with the Raiders as well. The Raiders got Lamar on a bad week. Mm-hmm. They got the Miami Dolphins on a bad week. They got the Steelers, who are just bad, and so they've been kind of inflated by opponent a little bit.
This is exactly the kind of Aaron Donald season where it could end up being one of the best seasons we've seen from an interior defensive lineman in the last decade, but it'll be Donald's 5th best season over that period of time. So it's like a bad year. We can't give him any kind of recognition for it.
We've got 3 out of the 4 AFC North teams in here. We've got Pittsburgh, we've got Cincinnati, we've got Cleveland. The Ravens going to get in here? I mean, it feels funny to say that the Ravens aren't the team that's making this top 10. What do we think about the Ravens defense? I'll just open it up like that.
I mean, look at these last 2 weeks. They shut down the juggernaut that was Justin Herbert and this Chargers offense. Even my guy Mike Williams couldn't have a great game. But the week before that, we have Carson Wentz, who is playing good this year, going for over 400 yards. So, Eric, I would like to think the real Ravens are somewhere in between, but maybe they're just figuring things out more now that they've had time without some of their top corners.
Well, this is a team that has spent almost almost 2/3 of their salary cap in the Lamar Jackson era on defense, right? So they built it up, but over time it's kind of gone away a little bit, right? Judon goes to New England. Earl Thomas, whatever happened to Earl Thomas happened to Earl Thomas. You have, Marcus Peters down with an ACL. You've had Calais Campbell be banged up a little bit. They drafted Patrick Queen to take over for C.J. Mosley, and he has not been better than C.J. Mosley was in Baltimore. And so players matter on defense, and the weaknesses of your weakest links matter. And the Ravens, by virtue of how much they spent on defense for so long, just always kept the water level high, even among their worst players. And now they still have the high caliber players, Marlon Humphrey. They have those guys on the team, but they're not necessarily strong in their weakest points anymore.
And it's also, I think, in part connected to that, it's a really high-risk defense. Yeah. Like, they blitz the hell out of you unless you're Patrick Mahomes, where several attempts of blitzing the hell out of him didn't work, so they finally stopped doing it.
Right.
But they are going to come after you, and a lot of the times that's going to work. Like, if you're facing a bad quarterback or a guy that can't contend with that, you're going to melt that offense and you're going to win. But if you're facing a team that figures it out, that understands where to go, which is easier when you have cornerbacks that aren't Marcus Peters out there and guys that you can actually go after, like, that can get you burned. And I think too many times so far it's gotten them burned.
And it really does underscore this. It underscores the fact that in this league, the defensive backfield and the wide receiver position are weak link systems, right? Because last week for the Chargers, a great offense with great receivers in Williams and Allen, but they only had two, right? Like, to really beat the Ravens, you have to flank them. You have to dare Marlon Humphrey to play the best guy. Your second, third, and fourth guys have to roast you. And there have been offenses in this league that can do that. But if you have, like, I think in Minnesota is this way too, two really good wide receivers, Osborne's been fine, but like a little bit of a question mark after that. The Bucs are a team, like, if they get in the Super Bowl against the Bucs, the Ravens, the Bucs are probably going to have way with their defense because the Bucs can throw 5 good receivers at you. The other teams that don't necessarily have that depth on the offensive side of the ball will not be able to hurt the lack of depth with the Ravens on the defensive side of the ball.
That multiple receiver thing is a trend when you look at those offensive teams on the rankings. Cowboys suddenly have a ton of receivers.
Yeah. And tight ends who are good too.
Right. Rams, Buccaneers, Chiefs, that's the one question that they have. Cardinals. Like, there's so many of these teams now that just have tons of receivers.
Right.
And they're going to win with number 3, 4, and 5 because you just can't go that deep with your defenders.
It's impossible to have a good fourth corner in the NFL. Almost impossible.
Right. And we're seeing teams really stress them out by having good third and fourth wide receivers. Yeah. Let's look at the top 10 overall. Dallas Cowboys, once again, the number 1 team here. We got the Rams at number 2. Browns at number 3. I mean, they were top 5 in offense, top 5 in defense. Now we see them as a top 3 team overall. We got the Ravens and the Buccaneers rounding out the top 5. I'm going to start off with the Dallas Cowboys. And because the question is very clear here. They are our number 1 overall team when it comes to comprehensive grades here. And I want to know, do you have faith in this team to win a Super Bowl? They're the number 1 team in our grading system right now. Are they built to win a Super Bowl?
I think, our priors have them more kind of like in the top 10, top 12 or so, but like they have played really well across the roster. And I think when you ask the question, like, okay, what do you need to win the Super Bowl in the NFL? You need a great quarterback, like a quarterback that you'd pay in, that you would never trade. Like
sure.
That's how I define that. Do you have that? Do you have a great offensive mind calling the plays? Do you have a defense that's good enough, right? They're not good enough, right? 2019 Chiefs. And Dallas checks all these boxes. The one question I do have is, with Mike McCarthy, and it might not come up, they've actually played the hard part of their schedule already. Like, they have Kansas City coming up, but for the most part, they played the Bucs, they played the Chargers, they played the hard teams on the schedule. Will Mike McCarthy make mistakes tactically that will cost them a game? Because we've already seen it. Philadelphia at the end of the first half. We saw it last week. A ton of clock management issues against New England almost cost them a game. Kellen Moore, when I think of coaching for this team, Kellen Moore is the star right now. Can McCarthy keep that from failing?
Yeah, I mean, I think, do you have confidence that the Cowboys are going to win a Super Bowl? No. Like, there's too much history. There's too much negative in terms of the things that could be concerning. But are they legitimate contenders? Yeah. Like, this offense is genuinely excellent. Like, they have, you lose Michael Gallup, right, one of your 3 best receivers, and all that does is open up windows for Cedric Wilson to go out there and look like the same kind of guy, right? You've now got 4 wide receivers that you're really comfortable throwing the ball to, as well as a backfield with Tony Pollard and Zeke, and then tight ends like Dalton Schultz coming out of nowhere to be a really effective receiving weapon as well. Dak Prescott playing as well as he's ever played, with all these receivers to throw to, behind an offensive line that's got back to being the best in the NFL. This is one of the best offenses in the league, and while the defense hasn't gotten good, it's gotten viable, and it's started to create a ton of turnovers, right? Now, that might not be sustainable, but we've seen teams sustain that for a season, and if they're able to go the whole year creating a ton of turnovers, that's the kind of thing that can propel an elite offense and a team that isn't normally there into a Super Bowl.
Yeah, they're playing offense like they know that their defense isn't that good, which is, I think, how you have to play football in the NFL.
Yeah, I agree.
And there's only one team, I think, on this top 5 that I don't think could score 30 points against pretty much anyone every time out. And that's the Browns, who we talked about before, could be one of the more pretender-ish teams in this list of contenders. But hell of a first 6 weeks for them.
I want to get Kendall into the show because I know that I am not the only one going through bye-week hell right now. And I wanted Kendall to help us recap all of these teams that are on bye this week before we get into these game previews.
It is a rough week for fantasy, to say the least. We've got teams on byes. We've got the Cowboys, the Vikings, Buffalo Bills, Jaguars, Chargers, and Steelers. Yikes. So, with all that, we can get into the start or sit questions for today. So let's start with Jalen Hurts, start or sit versus Matthew Stafford.
Pretty good problem to have either way. Both these guys are in my top 6, but I need to go with the worst real-life quarterback, better fantasy one in Jalen Hurts. 9 of his 10 starts he has finished as a top 12 QB. We call that a QB1 in fantasy business. The only time he didn't was that weird Nate Sudfeld game that we find a way to keep talking about each and every episode. So with Jalen Hurts, it's just too much of a cheat code to have this rushing upside. But don't let one down performance against the Buccaneers on national TV distract from him having 300 plus passing yards in 4 of his 10 career starts. So with Hurts, I get it. Who do you want throwing the ball 30 times a game for your NFL team? It's Matthew Stafford.
Right.
But Hurts gives you similar passing upside as Stafford with worlds more of a rushing floor.
What's next, Kendall?
Next, starter sit Damian Harris versus Mike Davis.
Got to go with Damian Harris here. Jets are dead last in PPR points per game allowed to the running back position. I think Mike Davis is a fine start in more leagues and not in this again, whatever the hell you want to call it, week we have on our hands here. Mike Davis, at least 15 touches in every game this year, and he has been a top 5 back in total forced missed tackles. So, when you share the offense with Cordero Patterson, only one ball to go around. But I do think Damian Harris as a touchdown home favorite. This is the sort of game where I think Belichick just wants to give him the ball as many times as possible.
Buy him again, that was good. I mean, I hate it because it's truly what I'm going through.
But it was good.
That was very good.
It was good. You got to give him credit. All right, next, starter sit Robbie Anderson versus Marquez Callaway.
This one hurts. I'm going with Robbie Anderson. It has not been good, but I still maintain I'm not going to let a 6-week sample cloud what Robbie's done the rest of his career, and that is be a good receiver more weeks than not. Tied for 8th in targets over the past 3 weeks, 11th in total air yards. No McCaffrey. Terrence Marshall is out with a concussion. DJ Moore's going to get his. I would like to think at some point, though, Robbie can get a little bit of a slump bust.
Can we pause for a second and appreciate the finesse that Robbie Anderson has had, where you go to Carolina and you get that second contract before everybody finds out how ass Darnold's been.
Yeah,
right? That's a good.
While already having played with Darnold to get the second contract.
Yeah, but you didn't choose Darnold.
Right.
You went to Carolina first.
Right.
They chose Darnold for you, and you're like, no, I'm getting my money. All right, good for him. Smart on his part. That Temple education is being used wisely.
He's also unlikely to drop everything sent his way the way he did a week ago. That's reason alone for a bounce back week.
I think Callaway's fine, but the problem is, he had the 2 touchdown game before the bye, one on a Hail Mary, one on a busted coverage. Some might say that's probably not going to happen every week.
All right, starter sit Tyler Boyd versus Darnell Mooney.
I think this is probably the closest one we have. I'm going to lean towards Mooney because he's facing a Buccaneers defense that just makes everyone pass. Even removing garbage time from the equation, nobody throws the ball more than when they are facing the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. Tough to assume rational coaching in the NFL, particularly from the Chicago Bears offense. I'm tentatively optimistic, though, guys, that we see Fields finally throw the ball around.
Yeah, interesting in this Baltimore-Cincinnati matchup. Boyd plays the slot a lot. Humphrey is one of the better inside-outside players in the league. obviously Boyd's not the best receiver in Cincinnati, but you might get the thing where you see with Belichick where he puts like his best guy, or he puts his best guy on the second best receiver and sort of brackets the other guys. And so you might just see Boyd neutralized by Marlon Humphrey today and them sort of double covering Chase and possibly Higgins. So that's one thing. You can assume rational coaching out of the Ravens.
And to what Eric was talking about earlier with teams sort of playing as if they have a bad defense, I really do think Dallas coming out of the gate in week 1 and against the Buccaneers and just being like, we're just going to throw the crap out of the ball because we know that they're going to score a lot of points. I feel like we're seeing a lot of teams just adopt that blueprint
against the Bucs.
Right. Yeah, against the Buccaneers specifically.
Smart move.
All right, last one. Start or sit, Dallas Goedert versus Tyler Higbee.
Yeah, get used to starting Dallas Goedert every single week. I think him and Irv Smith, unfortunately, can't play this year, really have stood out over the past few years as the top 2 quote-unquote backup tight ends that really would be top 5, top 6 fantasy options with the full-time job, which Dallas Goedert now has. He was on the COVID list last week. He is back, not expecting him to have any sort of holdups in terms of snap counts. So I love Devontae Smith still. I think he's been fine, a little more Hurts and kind of game script stuff than him being bad this year. But Dallas Goedert just could be the number 1 receiver on Philly for the rest of the year if you want to remove the whole tight end designation out of it.
All right, there we go. Well, we are helping you guys get your fantasy lineups ready. Western and Southern is helping you get your financial game plan ready to make sure you are rest assured on game day. Starting a family, looking to buy a house, or just want to see your money grow, Western and Southern has the strategies that can get you exactly where you want to go. Hit them up, talk with them, team up with them. They'll be able to find out exactly what your goals even are and how to get them. You can do so by going over to westernandsouthern.com/PFF. Kansas City Chiefs are facing the Tennessee Titans this week, and I think that this is a huge matchup, obviously because the Chiefs are in a little bit deeper of a hole than we thought was even physically possible here, actually losing football games in the regular season, which is wild. But the Tennessee Titans, I think, are a really interesting story early on because we all had our reservations about the Titans, especially with them losing Arthur Smith, the guy that we thought was the archetype of a really great offense there. But Tennessee is just proven to be a tough out every week, and sometimes they play down to their opponent, but other weeks they beat the Buffalo Bills like they did last week. And so, Sam, what are your initial thoughts here with this big game matchup? Because I think that this means a lot for both teams here.
Yeah, well, I think the Titans are proving that you can be relatively thin across the board if you have a few superstars, athletic freaks that are just impossible to stop. And, Eric broke the news on the show last week that analytics now supports the fact that Derrick Henry matters, right? Running backs might not matter.
It's a concession.
But
yes.
Derrick Henry matters. You have come round to seeing the light. And against the Kansas City defense, Derrick Henry might matter more than ever before.
Or he might not, because honestly, Sam, you and I could run through those holes and run over those linebackers, so I don't know.
We could spend the next 10 minutes just going through statistics in which Kansas City ranks dead last in the NFL. They are horrendous. They're worst in yards per play in the NFL, worst in yards before contact on average, worst in EPA per play against the run. Derrick Henry has been a monster. They're willing to run him as much as anybody else, knowing that that's how they get back in it. He has more rushing yards after contact than 11 different NFL teams have in total rushing yards.
And more than any running back has in total yards at all. Nick Chubb was second there. The interesting thing, if you look at that graphic that said 0.101 EPA per play, I know that's a new stat, so we don't have the greatest intuition about it. The 2,000-yard backs, like LaDainian, Adrian Peterson and Derrick Henry, they didn't average that much EP. Literally, you turn into a 2,000-yard back when you play the Chiefs, and from an efficiency standpoint, and that's really hard to do.
And he might be one to start with.
And he's one to start with, yeah.
Right. So 3,000-yard back.
Exactly. So I wonder how much they go away from it. The Chiefs last week put in, they took out Daniel Sorensen, they put in Juan Thornhill. They got better at tackling last week. But they still have so many holes there. They still have, Chris Jones is going to be playing with one hand today, right, basically. And Frank Clark I haven't seen him play in 2 years, basically. So it's going to be a tough one, and it puts all the onus on the Kansas City Chiefs offense in this game. A Kansas City Chiefs offense that has a ton of really good indicators as to how good they are.
I just want to say, I thought it was hilarious that Sam said, we could list off all these stats about how Kansas City's bad. And then we proceeded to list all of the
I
stats.
think he came up short.
Right. I said we could spend 10 minutes doing it. That was like the Cliff Notes version.
Okay.
We could spend way longer going through numbers than that.
Thank you for
The thing with all this, guys, and Derrick Henry, best running back alive, best ever. What's he going to be doing by December? Maybe 400 yards a game. Who knows? But we also have an maybe not equally bad Titans defense, but still a very bad Titans defense against Patrick freaking Mahomes. Like, we have certain sportscasters, not to throw other networks under the bus, actively talking about Mahomes versus Henry like that is a real question in the year 2021. So, yeah, it's great that Henry, is now mattering, but we've always known Mahomes matters more than any other player on this freaking planet. And, even looking at the lines right now, guys, just 4 points for this. Okay, give me the Chiefs.
Yeah, I mean, you look at it, the Titans were just 6-point underdogs at home to the Buffalo Bills, and now they're 4-point underdogs to the Chiefs. I know they're coming off of a little bit. And that's with them being like basically on one less day's rest in a letdown spot, right? But I just don't see like 2 points difference between these two, like between Buffalo and Kansas City seems a little odd. I will say, as a fantasy point, but also just as this Titans defense is bad point. The Chiefs are giving up the most yards in the NFL to tight ends. The Titans are giving up the least, but the Titans are giving up the most yards in the NFL to wide receivers this year, right? So if you're looking for a place where this offense could get right, if Demarcus Robinson, McCole Hardman, Josh Gordon, and obviously Tyreek Hill, they might eat today. And the Kansas City Chiefs so far this season are the least contested team when targeted this year. They're the only team in the NFL where less than 10% of their targets are contested in our system.
So I want to bring this point up. Is there something to the Titans coming off a big-time emotional win against the Buffalo Bills? Because that game, down to the wire, 4th down, it looked like the Buffalo Bills were going to march in and score, and all of a sudden the script and the result completely flips. You're celebrating on the field. You don't know what just happened, and this was massive for the Titans because, like I kind of prefaced this conversation with, we went into it not really knowing what the Titans were going to be, thinking that the AFC South was, okay, I guess the Titans are going to win, but nobody really had a ton of faith in it. Now they beat the Buffalo Bills, which a week ago, if we rewind a little bit, we would have said, hey, who's the number one team in the AFC? Buffalo. So they come and beat them, but how much does that go into it that they're coming off of that game? Is that momentum, or is it maybe something else?
Their letdown spots are real. I mean, you can codify them and say the week after you beat like a rival and stuff, there is a letdown at times. So that's one. The other thing is, when we look at Tennessee and how they sort of won that game, it wasn't like they dominated Buffalo. Buffalo dragged them up and down the field first two drives, had to settle for field goals. Then they get a 70-yard run by Henry. In the first half, Tannehill wasn't he had less than 100 yards. He wasn't doing great things. If that ball, Julio didn't make that amazing catch off that dude's helmet, they probably don't score again. And then they get an interception by Byard inside. Right. It was really when A.J. Brown came, alive after the Chipotle kind of ran through his system. He had that great fourth quarter. That was really it, but it wasn't much more than a couple good drives for Tannehill.
And also, they don't win that game if they don't stop Josh Allen on a sneak, and where he was 29 to 31 before that particular sneak. That was a game that easily could have gone the other way. The one counter to that, though, is this is a perfect letdown spot after a big game like that. But I think the Chiefs are still getting everybody's A game, right?
Yes.
So what you lose in the idea that that's an emotional letdown spot, you probably gain back by the fact that, hey, it's Kansas City this week.
Right.
We're not switching off and giving this a mail-in game.
It was surprising to see the Titans take down the big bad Buffalo Bills without having their passing game really come together yet. So Julio is going to play through that hamstring today. A.J. Brown has starved off the Chipotle long enough. I don't think we will as long as A.J. Brown, but he's got to worry about playing us not so much.
We take that risk every Sunday.
What did you say? Chipotle tried to take A.J. Brown from us? Didn't you tweet something like that? What was it?
Yeah, they tried to. And I'm not going to ban Chipotle. I love it too much. I'm too pathetic, I guess, for that. But please leave our guy A.J. Brown alone. The point I was trying to make here is that the Titans this year just 18th in EPA per pass play, and they have far too much talent to do that. And everyone just wants to say, oh, it's because Arthur Smith left. And I'm not willing to say that Tannehill, A.J. Brown, Julio Jones should produce a
offensive line banged up though with Luan, and I think that there are enough things on that offense where it's different than a quarterback-centric offense, right? A quarterback-centric offense, you can have injuries and stuff, you can have poor play, and it doesn't affect it as much. The Titans are way more of a evenly spread out offense.
They have.
And the more things that go wrong, the more it affects Tannehill, I think, than it does other quarterbacks.
They have one of the widest sort of splits and disparities between bad pass protection and good run blocking for an offensive line. They're one of the very few offensive lines in the NFL that are built that way, which is another reason that no matter what the score is, their solution is keep running down.
They know where their bread is buttered. Absolutely. Cincinnati Bengals, Baltimore Ravens is another game that I want to touch on here. We talked about the Cincinnati Bengals. I believe that they were a top 10 team in both offense and defensive grades there. They're playing well, but I think this is a huge test. Not only is it obviously a divisional game, it's got a lot of history to it. Lamar's playing at an MVP level, and it's almost like this barometer game where it's, can Cincinnati compete with the best of the best? Because that will really separate what might be a special year from just a good year. Sam, what do you think about this matchup?
This is one of the most fascinating kind of schematic chess battles this week to me, because we talked before about how this Baltimore Ravens defense is really high risk. They blitz the hell out of you. Joe Burrow right now is the #1 graded quarterback in the NFL against the blitz. A PFF grade of 93. 5 big-time throws, hasn't had a turnover-worthy play against the blitz, 10.5 yards per attempt against the blitz. The Ravens are a top 5 blitz team. They're top 2 in zero blitz. And this is while having that one game in there against Kansas City where they dialed it way back that skews all the numbers in the other direction. They're not going to give Joe Burrow the Patrick Mahomes respect, right? That came after 3 or 4 games where Mahomes just torched their blitz. So they're going to come after Burrow and say, we don't believe that you can beat this blitz. Now, that's fine. That it might work. Maybe you'll overwhelm Burrow in a way he hasn't been so far this season. But if he continues to carve the blitz against Baltimore the way he's done to everybody else so far, that's the recipe for the Bengals to put up a ton of points on this team.
Well, that has been the Bengals' MO, right? Like when you look at, they haven't played a hard schedule, and a lot of it has been deep stuff to chase, which you could say is noisy or not, but that one against Green Bay, like that's an inch away from being batted down. You have some plays there where they're living and dying by the big play, and we know that big plays are kind of noisy. I need to see the Bengals offense be a little bit more play for play efficient. In this game, that the Ravens give that up now, right? But they also, I think that they're enticing teams to try to throw deep on them because they have the trump card, which is if a team throws a 70-yard touchdown against you, guess who they have to face the next play? They got to face Lamar in the offense, and that's much more of a good bet for the Ravens than it was last year or the year before. So I think that's kind of like the gamble that they're making, and it's the reason why I really like the Ravens against the spread today. I think the Ravens outclass the Bengals in a lot of different ways, and I really like the Bengals. I like what they've done, but this number has moved 6 points over the last year, and I don't think the Bengals have gained 6 points of ground on the Ravens in 1 year.
Yeah, we can tell this Bengals passing game a little bit overachieving so far, I think. And with some of the fantasy points we look at, we can take expected points, just removing the production from it based on their targets, where we expect them to rank. Jamar Chase is only the wide receiver 34 in expected points this year, wide receiver 6 overall, because the guy already looks like not just a top rookie receiver, but truly a top receiver in the game. This year, only guys with more yards per out run, Devontae Adams, Cooper Kupp, and Deebo Samuel. So the fact Jamar Chase already finds him in this company is incredible. How much longer can he keep it going? So I'll be interested to see just how much longer he remains the completely featured #1 receiver. Eric, you've talked a lot about receiver, cornerback being a bit of a weak league system, and this year Brandon Cooks and Jamar Chase, 51% of their team's air yards. Let's get Higgins and Boyd involved. Come on.
Well, it's what happened, and I know the fantasy community does not like the fact that Hopkins doesn't get as many targets, but it's why the Arizona offense failed last year, which was they went to the well too many times. They went to their trump card too early in the season. And like this year, I think what they have is far more sustainable, because when they're in a game where they just can't buy a bucket, they can just say, okay, we're giving 70% of our targets to Hopkins in this game. We're just going to win that way. An offense that has to do that in week 1 through 6, like what are they going to do in week 7 through 18? And I like Tyler Boyd as much as the next person. I think they need to feature him more. This might be a tough game for him against Marlon Humphrey, but also T. Higgins. Like, you spent a second-round pick on him as well. Like, I agree. Like, I think that the offense for the Bengals, if it has a game where it's less top-heavy and more evenly distributed, then I'll be more convinced. But right now, when I look at this, I'm thinking Harbaugh versus Taylor.
Sure.
Like I'm thinking like,
right.
I don't know if I can. If you're giving me the Ravens for less than a touchdown, I think that's a gift.
There's a lot of reasons, I think, to go on Eric's side and to say that the Ravens are where the money should go because of the fact that they're stronger in a whole bunch of different areas. I just think that the Ravens defense is going to dare Burrow to chase, right? And we've seen that that's been connecting all season long. Now, it might not this week. It might be the best bet to make is to really pressure them and say, okay, let's see if you can do it this week against us as opposed to the other teams you've done it. But if it doesn't work out, they're going to give Cincinnati the chance to hang a lot of points and to keep it close.
Well, and to be fair to my point, like I think, or to be fair to your points, to be fair to my points,
that was almost better than the. Yeah. I've got a good question for the group. That would have been better.
To be fair to my point,
he said that was
no. I think when we look at the Ravens and how brilliant they've been, we are ignoring the Raiders game and the Lions game way more than we should, and the Colts game way more than we should. Like we've seen them beat Kansas City, get off the schneid for the first time, then we saw them pound. The Los Angeles Chargers, and we're like, okay, I'm ready. This team, MVP Lamar, this team's ready to be the Super Bowl team. And to be, we have ignored those games too much. And I think the reason, so to be fair to the Bengals side of this bet, that's why. I think like if you actually grade it out, it's probably closer. Like I would make this game more like 9.5 maybe, but like I can see it being closer to 6 because you're not allowed to ignore almost losing to Detroit. You're just not.
I went into this matchup thinking that this was going to be the game where, okay, just throwing it to Jamar Chase, it's going to stop here. But the Ravens, I looked it up, they have given up 44 plays of 15 yards or more this year, which is, I believe, 4th worst in the NFL. Meanwhile, the Bengals are by far the highest percentage of pass plays of over 15 yards. They're 14 for 15. So it's kind of like, I'm with you. This has got to regress. You cannot keep hitting Chase deep down the field the way that you have. But
yeah,
I don't know if it's against this Ravens team.
Exactly. It will at some point over the season, but it might not be this game because the way the Ravens play on defense, they're going to give you that. That's going to be the outlet against what they're sending. And if they do what we've talked about before, that if they put Marlon Humphrey on Tyler Boyd because he's the slot receiver, slot corner, it's going to be somebody else covering Jamar Chase deep down the field. It's going to be a guy that you like that matchup. So it's high variance, it's low percentage plays, but they're going to be daring you to make those.
Right. We have a lot of questions for how this offense is going to do. How the hell are the Bengals going to slow down the Ravens, though? Because this is not your granddad's Ravens offense at this point. They're only 14th in EPA per run play, 5th in passing. 3 straight years with Lamar, they were just easily the most run-heavy team in the NFL. Now, we got Hollywood Brown balling out each and every week, seemingly. Mark Andrews, Rashad Bateman is finally healthy. Is this just the new Ravens offense, Eric? Like Lamar, passing quarterback.
Yeah, I think so. I think this Ravens offense, and we haven't even seen them have to close out a game yet, right? They've been behind, they've sort of been even with teams. That's also why I like the Ravens, which if they get ahead of a team, no team is better at closing out, even with the kind of sled dogs they've had at running back so far this year. I think it's that's an aspect of their offense we haven't seen that we've seen a lot over the last 2 years.
All right, time to bring in Darius Butler, our good friend, who's going to tell us how dumb all of our takes are. No, actually, we're not doing a full Dare I Say segment this week. But Darius, actually, to start this off, I do want to revisit one of your Dare I Says, because you talked about Justin Herbert potentially being an MVP candidate. And at the time, it was a wonderful call. Justin Herbert couldn't have been playing better, but since then, I don't know if you jinxed him. I don't want to say the jinx or anything, but it's just been a little up and down. How do you feel about the Chargers, honestly, though, from this point on?
Still feel great. I still feel great. They have one dud, still early in the season, that West to East Coast, 10 o'clock start, right before bye week. And they played a damn good football team in Baltimore as well. Wink had his defense ready to play. Lamar Jackson, this was going into this game, this was probably the only game this season I said I couldn't give Justin Herbert the edge at quarterback because of how well Lamar has been playing. And they came out and just played a better game. And, they got a bye week this week. And I fully expect them to come off the bye week and play some good football. the biggest concern I have with that team is the run defense. You know, they've been Swiss cheese in run defense, and that really concerns me, obviously, as the later the season goes on. But still very, very bullish on Justin Herbert and that Chargers team. Brandon Staley's still the head coach, so I'm still good.
Yeah. Darius, do you get concerned a little bit that, you know, a lot of what happened in the first 5 or 6 games is variance? They made basically every single fourth down they went for. And obviously, if they don't make some of those fourth downs, they don't beat probably Cleveland. They don't beat Kansas City. And then it all goes belly up against the Ravens. Basically, none of their fourth downs hits. Like, I think sometimes we look at how, like, impressive a team is wins and losses wise. We sometimes don't strip back this idea of, like, yeah, but all these games seem to hinge on 1 or 2 plays. And every single thing for the Chargers had come up good until last week when it all came up poorly. The other thing, and you brought this up, which I really like, they play one of the softest boxes in the league on defense. Yeah. And usually that's a recipe to win. But in the AFC currently, there are a couple good teams, right? Tennessee, Cleveland, and Baltimore, where they probably don't match up well on defense.
Yeah, they don't. But I still like them. And not making those fourth downs last week, I mean, fourth down to me wasn't the biggest issue. It was first, second, third down. They just didn't look ready to play. That's why I didn't make the show last week. I was actually at a wedding, and kind of in one of those, my sister's wedding. Congratulations, Brianna. And my brother actually had the phone up. We were watching that game. I was trying to peek and get as much as I could. And every time I looked, they were, you know, getting negative plays, get behind the stick, getting knocked off the field. So I don't think it was just fourth down, but it will be situations down the line where those fourth down situations come up against good teams. And I got all the confidence in the world that he'll be able to make them. They started out of the gate with one of the toughest schedules. And you can look back, and there was even that Cowboys game that they lost. There were so many yards and touchdowns that came off the board because of penalties. So, like I said, I haven't lost confidence in this team. I think the Kansas City Chiefs will start to pick up their engine. I think the Raiders will even start playing well again. But I still have full confidence in the Chargers, picking it back up and winning this division.
I got to talk about the Sunday Night Football matchup with you. The San Francisco 49ers playing against a team whose helmet you got on right behind you over your right shoulder, the Indianapolis Colts. Man, what do you think about this matchup here? I mean, I think it's pretty big for both teams. There's quarterback, I don't want to say controversy, I'll just say storylines with what's going on with both Carson Wentz and Jimmy Garoppolo. What do you think about this game on Sunday night?
It's a bigger storyline in San Fran, but, Trey Lance, he got in there, and I think what he showed everyone was that he's not ready. And that was my opinion coming into this season. And Jimmy G is showing everyone he can't stay healthy. So they got to figure some things out over there. Carson Wentz on the other side, he's been playing well. He's been playing solid all year, but these last 2 weeks he's really turned it up. I hate that, Paris Campbell's going to be out. T.Y. Hilton came back. He had a big impact against Houston, but he's going to be out as well. So some guys are going to have to step up and make some big plays. But I'm still taking the Colts to pull off the upset. I think they're 4.5-point dogs Sunday Night Football. I think they get out there and they figure out a way to win. Taylor has been, dominant. We're getting a little healthy on the defensive side of the ball and on the O-line. So I think the Colts still find a way to win this game.
Man, Darius mentioned it. Carson Wentz playing good ball. I mean, over the last 3 weeks, his quarterback rating is 123.4. And then under pressure, it's even better. It's 128. So it's like Wentz it feels mentally is in a different state than he's been since, well, maybe that almost MVP season for him.
Yeah, if you're Frank Reich, all of a sudden you must feel pretty smug with yourself. You hitch your wagon to this Carson Wentz thing and reclaiming him after the disaster of a year ago. Last week was his highest single-game PFF grade of his entire career. And Darius, how much of an effect do you think T.Y. Hilton coming back into this lineup is and finally giving Wentz a receiver that can win with speed and one-on-one on the outside? Even in Philly, he's never really had that one reliable guy that wins in that way.
Yeah, T.Y. coming back was huge. Not only, for Carson, but T.Y. is, he's one of those pillars in that team, on and off the field as far as energy. Obviously, the defense still has to focus on him. Paris Campbell was kind of coming into his own. He's been a guy who, we can't keep on the field, but he can take a top off of defense. So that was big. So not having him this week, I think will hurt. But somebody else has got to step up. Pittman has been playing well in his second year. Jack Doyle's obviously Mr. Reliable. And, those backs, they're going to have to lean heavily on those backs this week. And Carson Wentz, man, like I said, he's been playing well all year. I think Frank, some of these games, that Baltimore game jumps out for sure. Frank could have made some better calls. He could have been more aggressive, put that team in a better situation. And I think as long as they continue to do that, this Indianapolis Colts, they could, get hot and run a couple games off here. They need to, because they're right behind, not right behind, a couple games behind Tennessee, who has a tough matchup this week as well. So I'm sure they're kind of looking across saying, hey, this is a big week for us. You got Jimmy G coming back off injury, who hasn't been playing great at all this year. You don't have Trey Lance in the holster to come in. So I think things are set up for them to pull off an upset.
Do you think that, I'll say best case scenario in a lot of different situations, do you think this Colts team could be a legit division contender, division winner, potential playoff team? What do you think about
this? This is like an actual contender, not Eric Jett's contender.
Oh, right, yeah, right. You're taking that word, it's a hard contender, not a soft contender. Right.
They'll be competitive.
It really depends on injury, just like it always does all the way around the league. But, what Tennessee's doing right now with Derrick Henry, and him being unstoppable. I don't think Tannehill's playing great. A.J. Brown is in and out of the lineup. Julio's been in and out of the lineup. Their defense is banged up, though, so they could struggle, especially facing a bunch of these quarterbacks, in the conference. But so for all those reasons, I still do give a coach the chance to win. I picked them to win it coming into the year, so maybe I just want to be right. But I give them a medium contender. I don't know if it's hard, but I say medium. But it really depends on the health of, we just can't get guys healthy out there. It's been a tough year for us. We lost Blackman for the year. He tore his Achilles. Yeah. He was a second-year, safety who's been playing well. So it's tough. Guys got to get healthy. Guys got to step up, make plays. But it's a division that's, winnable every year.
I think medium contender still means they're right there. I mean, that means it could go either way. So that to me, that says that it's in the cards. And that was the whole question. Could it maybe be in the cards? Darius says that's the case. All right, let's move on to Las Vegas Raiders and Philadelphia Eagles, because I want to touch on this one. Obviously, the Raiders started the season very, very well. Philadelphia Eagles still feels like they're trying to find their identity everywhere. How much of a running team are they going to be? If they're going to be that, why aren't they giving the ball to running backs, right? It seems like Nick Sirianni's still trying to figure it out, but this one's in Philly, so I'm wondering, what do you think this matchup's going to be like, Darius?
No, I think this is in Vegas. I hope it is. That's what I bet on. Because I got Vegas I got Vegas to win this game. I got Vegas to cover. Philly does get Lane Johnson back, who one of the best tackles in the game. He had to deal with some things off the field, so that offensive line gets beefed up. Jalen Hurts kind of hasn't been, consistent, and hasn't been hitting those guys down the field consistently. And like you said, the balance should be there. I actually picked Miles Sanders on my fantasy team because I thought he would be getting a lot of touches this year.
You're not the only one. Many people were with you there.
Well, I think when you look at this game, right? Like you look at the total being 49. There's only one game all week, 2 games all weekend that are totals above 50. This is one where if you're an over bettor, you really like it. I think the only issue that I have with it is Darren Waller has come down with a little bit of an injury. Everybody's given Darius Slay all the credit for what he's done as a shutdown player. They sort of forget, though, that when the Philadelphia Eagles played the Chiefs, Tyreek Hill went for like 12 for 250 or whatever and 3 touchdowns. And it's like, the Raiders don't have that kind of player, but they do have speed in Henry Ruggs. They do have sort of a good possession guy in Bryan Edwards. And then you look at the other side, and Philly they go for 4th downs. They have great speed on the outside. And it's not like the Las Vegas Raiders have been this like really good defense on the corners, right? And Philly's actually a decent offensive line. So to me, I like the Raiders too in this game, but I also like over. I think over indoors, to me, that's one of the better bets of the weekend.
It was so ugly in that Tampa Bay game, but can we chill out on bringing the T word, the Tebow word with Jalen Hurts here? He is not bad, people.
Oh, Lord.
He's actually thrown for
who said that?
You would be surprised what you see on the old Twitter sphere sometimes.
Former Eagles great, Tim Tebow.
Get this, though. Jalen Hurts, I know it's not always pretty. One of only 7 quarterbacks since last season with over 300 passing yards in over 40% of his starts. So at least in fantasy land, you were saying we can't get any consistent production out of Miles Sanders, and you are right. They will not give him the ball. Jalen Hurts, though, is like 2018, 2019 Josh Allen. Fantasy star, we'll worry about real life.
Yeah, and if they get behind, they're not a team that like the game goes under when they're behind. The Dallas Cowboys game on Monday Night Football, actually the Thursday night against Tampa actually did go under by a point. But like they're a team, the Kansas City game that went over by a country mile. Like if you believe that the Raiders are going to control this football game, you probably think that there's going to be points because the Raiders score points and Philadelphia is not great defensively when they're not a team that can limit damage defensively.
Darius, what do you think about Jalen Hurts? I'm very curious to just your thoughts of Hurts and how you view him, because the Eagles, as it stands right now, they have 3 top 10 picks in next year's NFL draft, right? And so anytime that's the case, you give yourself the ability to select a quarterback. And of course, who's in the class will matter a lot, and we're kind of seeing that develop through college football. But are you at the point where you think, yeah, the Eagles are basically going to have to spend one of those picks on a quarterback, or do you think we need to kind of pump the brakes there? You still got some faith in Hurts?
I mean, I have unfortunately, I have less faith in him now than I had coming into the season. I feel like at this point in the season, I would have known, and I was high on Hurts coming out. We went the second round. I thought that was a great pick for the Eagles. And I just felt like at this point in the season, I would have been more convinced that he was their guy.
Sure.
Right now, it's still a question mark. He can do things obviously special athletically, and sometimes I think that's kind of holds him back a little bit. But if he just continues to take the easy play, losing a guy like Ertz, who you kind of knew you were going to trade the whole time. That's kind of a safety blanket. So I think he's a guy who you need to bring in good weapons around him. You need to have balance in the running game. You got to be able to hand it off to another running back 15, 18, 20 times a game to make his reads and the drop backs better. Got a good, decent O-line, but I just haven't seen enough from Hurts to say, hey, we can build around this guy. He's our franchise quarterback. But he's got a few more weeks to prove that. But these franchises move on quickly, especially when you got new head coaches calling the shot. So this year is big for Hurts. These next probably 6 to 8 weeks are huge for him.
It's funny how perception changes, though, because I had almost no faith in Hurts being anything before the season. And after, 6 weeks, you're like, he's kind of been more impressive than I thought he would.
Yeah, it was weird. Last season, obviously, he was such a breath of fresh air over Carson Wentz. And then they win the first game against a good Saints team with him at quarterback. Yep. And then the last 3 games are kind of like, especially the last few. They lose to Andy Dalton. They lose to, they don't have great performances there. They lose to a Cardinals team that really didn't beat anyone else the rest of the season at the time. And so I think it was the mixed bag that we sort of, and you have different opinions, right? If you're high on him like Darius or low on him like Sam, you're probably right in some way. So
exactly.
A really big factor this week, though, is that he gets Lane Johnson back at right tackle. And the reason that's huge is because they're going up against Max Crosby, leads the NFL in total pressures, 43, and has yet to face an even viable right tackle. He has had 6 weeks worth of beating up on really bad players at right tackle, whether it was Lane Johnson back or even if they'd had Jordan Mailata playing right tackle this week. This is the first decent player that he's had to go up against. So I'm not saying that Max Crosby is entirely a product of the players he's been going up against, but it's definitely a factor, and we'll find out this week how much of a factor it's been.
Before we get you out of here, Darius, we got to get your dog of the day. Who is your underdog that you are betting this week?
Well, I'm betting them strictly to cover, not to win. I want to be clear about that.
Okay. All right. Just to make sure everybody out there knew.
Just want to be clear about that, but they had a 7.5-point underdogs Washington football team, the Green Bay Packers, man. Green Bay, they've been hot obviously since week 1. That debacle against New Orleans to open up the season. They ran off 5 straight, but they haven't been winning by a ton of points. I had them to win and cover against Chicago last week, but this week I think Washington football team puts up a little bit better of a fight. Aaron Rodgers still figures it out and gets the win. But of all the 5-win teams, they are by far have the lowest point differential at 8. And the next closest person, I believe, is the Ravens at plus 47. So they keep games close. Aaron Rodgers figures out a way to get it Devontae at the end and set up a win. So I got the Packers winning the close one. My dog of the day will be the Washington football team.
This does feel for Green Bay a lot more like 2019 than 2020. And I do remember there was a game where Haskins took the Washington football team into Green Bay that year, and Haskins being Haskins, they still covered that number. And a lot of Green Bay games that season were of that, like, oh, they don't look that great, but then you look up for air, they're 13-3.
Right.
I do like this. I do think you hit on something that a lot of bettors have liked. This number got all the way out to 9.5 at one point, and you've seen people back Washington. The only thing that makes me hesitate is this reminds me a lot of Week 3, where people did the same thing with Washington in Buffalo, and of course an elite quarterback just kind of shredded them. But you did see the number in that game go from 6.5 down to in the 7s through those teaser numbers. So that's a very. I think I support that bet.
Well, some of the issues we've seen with Green Bay, Rodgers just hasn't been the same guy throwing the ball downfield. Dead last in catchable deep ball rate. The Packers have been this year at just 31%. But now they get the league's single worst scoring defense in Washington. William Jackson's out. So Chase Young.
I was told the Washington defense was going to be great.
Well, I was going to say, what's going to happen?
I was told by every media credentialed person that the Washington football team's defense mattered, and they're the worst.
Look,
this is my surprise face.
Big media over here on my left.
Mistakes were made. We learn and we move on.
Look, I'm going to paper over my Jets takes for a second and roast all you on your Washington football team takes.
But we talked about this, how they're a bad defense, maybe not quite as bad as they meant, but they keep running into one great quarterback after another. So even if they fix it, not here.
Yeah. Darius, we previewed Bengals Ravens earlier in the show, and just to get your quick thoughts on it, you mentioned Lamar Jackson. He just feels like this is a guy who's won an MVP trophy already. And it feels like he's playing better than he ever has. I mean, what do you think about Bengals versus Ravens in that matchup there?
I think it's going to be a good game. Obviously, Bengals are ahead of schedule. Burrow and those offensive weapons are never out of the game. But even that defense is playing well on a per play basis. So I like him. But, I can't bet against Lamar. I've learned my lesson. I bet against him, I think, 3 times now, and I'm 0-3. So I'm betting with Lamar to win. But I do have the Bengals to cover that at 6.5 point. I was surprised that line was that big, actually. So I'm going to take the Bengals to cover that one. But the Baltimore Ravens win another one.
It's interesting to me because, I think that it makes sense. The Bengals are very live. They're very plucky as an underdog. They've had the second easiest schedule in the NFL to this point, second hardest coming out. And the interesting thing about the line is last year, these two same teams was 12.5. And so to me, I think the Bengals have improved a lot. 6.5 is a lot of points to improve on, and I think the Ravens are hurt a little by their injuries, but I don't think that they have lost any points relative to last year, especially given all the COVID stuff they had. So it's a very interesting. I've heard a lot of really smart people on the Bengals this week, and it's one that I can't quite get on.
I think you can definitely make the case, though, that they have improved that amount. Remember, last year's Bengals team, even when we were encouraged by Burrow, we were just saying it's only a matter of time before he's injured behind this line. Yeah. It's just a disaster waiting to happen. It eventually happened.
6.5 points on the point spread, though, is the difference between the Tampa Bay Bucks and the Minnesota Vikings.
Absolutely.
I don't think that they've gone that far.
But all of a sudden, we're not waiting for disaster. We're like, Joe Burrow is for real. Jamar Chase has added something completely different. Everything else in this offense is better. Even the pass protection looks way better because of all those things.
Because they drafted Penei Sewell instead of Jamar Chase. This is an easy game,
Mistakes
people.
Were made.
Easy game.
People learn and we move on.
Yes. There we go.
Eric, do you have a bet for the road?
I do. Look, Tennessee has a way better record than everybody thought they'd have. At least me, going in so far.
Yeah, everybody knew you.
And their defense is awful. Okay, Tennessee gives up the most yards in the NFL to wide receivers, the least amount of yards to tight ends. I think Patrick Mahomes is going to absolutely carve this defense today. So whatever over you can get your hands on with Mahomes. Over 2.5 touchdowns is minus 140. That's a steep price, but I'd still pay it. Over 28.5 completions, that's like minus 105. I'll take that as well. Thank you very much. And anytime you can get a same game parlay with Henry at anything around 100 yards, 115 yards, I take that too, because I think if the Titans are going to go down today, they're going to go down with Henry getting 150 yards. That's their identity, damn it, and that's what they're going to go with.
Sounds like you're betting your boss's yacht on this one. Like that's where we are in this game.
Yeah. I'm taking Chris's yacht and I'm putting it. I walked it over to the sports book and I said, "Give me all the overs."
I mean, that's as big as it gets.
Sure,
on the scale, like that's
right. If you've ever Googled biggest yacht in the world, that's Chris's yacht for sure. Darius, what do you think about his calls there that Kansas City Chiefs are going to tear him up?
I like the overs on everything in this game with these two defenses. I like, obviously, Derrick Henry. I think he'll run through his defense, and Mahomes will have his way as well. I think this will be a shootout. But I got the Kansas City Chiefs coming out. They got to, at some point, they got to light a fire under their ass and get going. And I think, Tennessee been banged up in the secondary. They weren't great to begin with. But I think Kansas City just puts up too many points for them to keep up with, handing that ball off to 22.
All right, there we go. Final thoughts from anybody? Darius, you got any final thoughts? Any games that we didn't bring up with you yet? Anything?
No, I think we covered it all. I'm looking forward to seeing those Jets get beat up again. Let's see how many picks Zach Wilson throws today. Bye.
Anybody?
I made a bet this morning on Zach Wilson over 2.5 or 1.5 touchdowns at plus 150. So give it to me. If Davis Mills can carve up that defense, Zach Wilson can carve up that defense. Damn it.
Kendall, you got any final thoughts?
No, I'm ready for my fantasy team to be absolutely shredded. So that'll be great. But it'll be a great day. Great day.
I think 8 of my 9 starters are either hurt or on bye this week, so
it's still a great day to be.
But I got to ask the table. Anybody else have the Bears covering today?
Absolutely not. As the lone Tampa
I took them at plus 13, and then I came back on the Bucks at like minus 12. So I got a little bit of a middle there. I'm trying to hit up. Yeah, but no, not really.
You got them covering?
I got him covered. I am worried about the big fella 96 being ruled out.
One of
the middle. I think they'll test that out pretty early, but. Couple guys being out, AB being one of them. I think this is they win this game by a touchdown. 11.5, I think is the last line I saw. I think the Bears cover that.
Fields one of the worst quarterbacks in the NFL against the blitz, and the Bucs are the most blitz-happy team in football. Either he needs to figure it out pretty quickly, or that's going to go south quite fast.
There's a lot of like numbers and tendencies that go into this game, but also like Gronkowski, Antonio Brown, Levante David, like all these guys are.
Do players matter? Will be the question.
Do players matter? We'll have to stick around to see.
Great question.
For Darius Butler, Kendall Valenzuela, Sam Monson, Ian Hartitz, and Eric Eager, I'm Trevor Sikkema. Thank you guys so much for watching. We'll see you right here again next week. Enjoy your Sunday.